Hello, and welcome to another episode of Double Coverage with Jackie and Cassidy. This is the one where Bates rats on Spurrier. That's right, we have your favorite Florida Gator storyteller, James Bates, with us this week, telling some of his Steve Spurrier stories. You know, if you've been around Florida fan base for a while, you know there's no one that can tell a Spurrier story quite like James Bates. I even heard some new ones this week. Jackie got to hear them all from Bates. He's such a treasure. So stick around for that later in this episode. But first, just welcome in, Jackie. Hello, how are you this evening?
I'm great, Cassidy. And man, has it been a busy Wednesday?
It has. It
It,
has. And I know this might not get posted till Thursday, but filming this on Wednesday tonight, it's been a whirlwind. Why don't you give a little bit of a recap of what happened today?
sure, I think,
Let's start with Scott Strickland. Sorry.
yeah, that's the biggest. I think for Gator fans, I think they're really excited about this possibility for the next fall. So Scott Strickland was holding a Zoom call with a few faculty members and people that work at University of Florida this morning. And during that call, he said that there's a huge possibility, and he thinks the swamp will be at full capacity. Now, he believes all fall athletic events will be at capacity, which is amazing considering where we were at this point last year, Cassidy. We didn't know what was going to go on with college football season
Right.
at this point last year. So that is a huge news. Now, there were a lot of things that also came out of that meeting, including that he said that over 60% of the student athletes already received their vaccines. And he mentioned that one of the main reasons why he feels like we're going to be at capacity at the swamp was because most people in Alachua County have been vaccinated. Probably around 60% of the county would be vaccinated by the end of this month is the projection, or towards next month. So Alachua County actually is the county that has per capita the most vaccinated in the state of Florida.
Nice.
So Alachua County has been doing very, very well as far as when you look at the vaccination rates. Actually, Alachua County was one of the counties that Governor Ron DeSantis has mentioned quite frequently, actually, in his press conferences, saying that they did a very good job in how they handle their vaccinations. So that's why, Scott Strickland is pretty bold in this declaration, saying that they're going to be at capacity moving forward, they think. Now, obviously, one of the conversations that people are going to be having, well, it's going to be at capacity, but do you need a vaccine card? Vaccine passports is such a big talking point nowadays. And actually, the Buffalo Bills have announced they will be at capacity, but you will have to prove that you've had vaccinations. So this could be very...
And the Staples Center also did that today. The Staples Center, the home of the LA Lakers, among others, have also made that same announcement today.
So it's going to vary from venue to venue. We've seen, in Texas, full baseball stadiums with no vaccination requirement. So obviously this is, if you're going to a game in the fall, just check before you hit the road, because you possibly will need proof of vaccination. So that was a big thing that was discussed. And Scott Strickland, actually, I want to make sure I read this tweet verbatim, so we don't say that we're taking this out of context.
Read Graham's.
Yeah, read Graham's
and then read
Scott Strickland's. So Graham Hall, who reported on this conversation, said
great friend of ours, an excellent reporter.
Yes, and he works for the Gainesville Sun. And he wrote, regarding proof of COVID-19 vaccine cards for attendance to sporting events, Strickland didn't have a concrete answer, but said that they'll do it if UF Health recommends it. Now, Scott Strickland quote tweeted Graham and said, what I actually said was that I don't anticipate requiring vaccine for athletic attendance. However, we certainly are encouraging as many people as possible to get vaccinated. So it wasn't completely out of context what Graham was saying. Obviously, that no one's going to make a decision today about vaccination requirements in the fall yet, just because we don't know the numbers that are going to be closer there. It's kind of like making a decision about football season in May of last year when we had so many unknowns. Now, the one thing sorry, I just want to point is that one thing that Graham Hall mentioned is about UF Health. And I would want to say that Strickland has really worked so closely with UF Health, and UF Health has done such a great job. And a lot of the things, a lot of the protocols, I think Alachua County has benefited so much due to UF Health being in the county. So I think one of the things that we saw even just a few weeks ago, I think over a month ago, when UF Health and Scott Strickland, came to the decision to increase capacity at baseball and softball games, where they made social distancing from 6 feet to 3 feet. So obviously Scott Strickland is going to be talking to UF Health. So if UF Health believes that no vaccination requirement is necessary, then Josh Strickland is following medical and expert advice. So I think that's something that we have to make sure we say. Strickland's not making this decision because Strickland wants this. Strickland is still talking to UF Health. And there's also a caveat to all this as well. Because of where University of Florida is, it is based in Alachua County, which means they also have to work with Alachua County officials. So Alachua County officials, the SEC and University of Florida all have to come to an agreement on this.
And then let me ask you this, just because I could be very wrong, and I don't want to throw this out there if I'm understanding it, if I'm misunderstanding it. Because I saw a lot of people ask, well, what about the fact that Governor DeSantis has said he's not going to allow vaccine passports in the state of Florida? I don't know all the rules and regulations and nuances to the vaccine passports, but UAA, let me back up. UF is a public university.
Right.
But UAA, the athletic department, is a private entity. Does that make a difference as far as what can and can't be regulated by the governor?
See, that is the big question. So there's a lot of gray areas that we're approaching this for the first time. It's kind of like when we were doing this whole thing with the pandemic, many of you don't know, I also work at TV20 and I cover some of the news side of this. Alachua County had some of the harshest, I guess, mandates and restrictions when it comes to COVID, but they've never given one fine during this whole thing, even with mask mandates. No fines were given. So a lot of the problems that local municipalities have is that there's no state mandate. And even Governor DeSantis just put in a legislation that he didn't want people and businesses to get fined due to COVID-19 restrictions. So right now you're going to have a battle between state and local. And then also,
what's new?
I know what's new, but then also you have to think about businesses. So for example, in Disney World, you don't require a vaccine passport, but you are mandated to wear masks inside of Disney World. That's a business. There's no state mandate, but Disney does kick people out if you're not wearing masks. So for Florida, I would say, because again, UAA is a private entity. So it's kind of like when people talk about, just the money that the Athletic Association was losing during the pandemic, and they were saying, oh, the University of Florida is losing money. That's two different things. So because they get so many private donations, that's very different. So I think at the end of the day,
whenever you see, this is going to sound mean, but like whenever I see like a history teacher from UF or a school complaining about the money going into the football program, whereas their class has old desks, that money ain't your money.
No, yes, it's
that's totally completely different money. Completely different coffers.
Totally different. And and again, it's going to be a very hard thing moving forward. There's going to be some businesses that are going to require vaccine proof. You're going to know that that's going to happen. And it's something that's not new for some people. Like we were looking at daycares for our kids. We're going to have to prove our vaccinations. So it's going to be interesting. I do think if Florida does impose something along those lines, they're going to be able to. I just don't see it happening right now.
Right.
I
think it's also important to point out that this came up because it's a question that a lot of people and businesses are currently having to ask themselves. It's not, I don't think, something that Scott Strickland is necessarily seriously considering. I think he was simply saying, I don't, because and if you can, I know you have it pulled up, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in his clarification quote tweet, he said, what I said was, I don't anticipate having to do that.
Right.
And I think what makes Scott Strickland so good, and especially in the public eye, is his ability to sort of like never put himself in a bad situation where he's having to contradict himself, which is why a couple of weeks ago it shocked us so much that he threw so much assurance behind Mike White. That's just not Scott Strickland's style.
And honestly,
he was saying sort of like, I don't think this is going to happen, but you never know, because he's been so good about deferring to UF Health when it comes to any COVID-related issues. And so that was a COVID-related question. He wasn't going to answer it 100% one way or the other without tapping in UF Health as well. So all of that to say, me personally, my opinion, where I see sports going and where I think we're going to be this fall, especially with Scott Strickland having made the comment that he thinks every adult who wants to will be vaccinated by September. Joe Biden has said the same thing. I don't think that's going to be required.
No, I think that's I'm
but I think he was just making sure he didn't put himself in a position where he said, no, it's not going to be required, and then have to change that at the end of August. That's the only reason I think it was sort of that's sort of why. That's just how Scott Strickland handles those things. He never wants to put himself into a situation where he's contradicting himself, which is why I think he said no, but not completely no, if that makes sense.
No, and it was a very smart tactic. So it will be interesting to see the next couple of months. I think with everything COVID related, we always, we've learned that we can't really make decisions in April about September. It's all about seeing how many people are vaccinated, how vaccinations are going across the country, not just in Alachua County, obviously a lot of people from different states. But the only thing that I would suggest people do right now is already research what's going on in other schools or other sports teams that you're traveling with, because again, your local school or your favorite college might say no vaccine passports or vaccine cards required here, but some of your road games will probably need those. So just make sure, and I don't know what the process will be. I think the Buffalo Bills was saying there will be an app on your phone. So yeah, it's going to be very, very different. So whenever you buy a ticket, just make sure you read the fine print.
Yeah. Well, speaking of fine print, the NCAA put in a little bit more today. This is almost sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It was known it was going to happen. It's a good thing I don't work in words for a living. I completely lost the one I was going to say. This was known this was going to happen, but the NCAA officially passed the legislation to allow for the one-time transfer rule. What that means is a kid can transfer one time, no questions asked, and have immediate eligibility. Until now, they technically didn't have immediate eligibility. They had to spend a year in residence, which means they had to spend a calendar year at that school, living on that campus or in that college town before they could be eligible, unless they applied for a waiver and received one, which the NCAA handed out waivers left and right to anybody and everybody except the people that actually deserved them. But so that wasn't a huge deal. But now you can transfer I think you can transfer more than once, but you can transfer once, no questions asked, eligible immediately. Jackie, initial thoughts, how much is this going to change the sports? Because it's not just one sport, it's all sports. How much is this going to change college athletics?
Oh, I think it's going to change college athletics completely. And I think that's what Dan Mullen alluded to a few months ago when he was asked about this, when he was asked about his interest in the NFL. And he gave a pretty candid answer when he said, well, you know what? I don't know how college football is going to look in the next few years. And honestly, I could see a lot of kids moving around to different schools. I think basketball, you've already seen how things are changing. A lot of transfers. Mike White went straight to a transfer portal when he lost those guys and did a great job at it. And yes, that's, how basketball is moving, but I think football is going to see more and more and more. The only thing I'm more worried about when it comes to that, if I was a high school athlete that was possibly, not good enough for a Division I school, Division II, some of these schools now are going to go into the transfer portal. So you have these fringe guys in high school that are going to be affected, which is really sad. Some of these guys are not good enough to be D1 level, but they could go D2 or D3. And now those high school kids might not even get a look, because why would these coaches can get guys who played D1 but wasn't good enough to stay in those competition and now can go to D2, D3. and it's going to be it's going to hit high school. It really is, and it's going to be a shame for those athletes. But on the flip side, I completely get it, because it's unfortunate that sometimes players have no power. I know some people say, well, they get a free ride, they get all these things, but what happens if you go on you get on campus and you sign your NLI and your coach is fired? Or if the assistant you wanted to play for, is there an early signing day? That's happened even at Florida, signed and not in line, and your assistant coach is leaving for another job. At the end of the day, yes, you preach, yes, you pick your school and not the coach, you pick your school and not the football, but at the end of the day, you pick the coach because of a system. You pick a coach because you're going to be playing at a certain level, and you're going to have you're going to get developed, and you're picking a system where it's the best fit. So anyone who keeps saying you choose the school, not the sport, no. You choose an environment. You have to choose a school that you like, and you have the environment that you like. But at the end of the day, these kids are choosing schools that can showcase their talent, and these coaches can leave for other jobs at any point. They can leave if they want. So I feel like this, at least give these kids a 1 year out, so they don't have to go through the NCAA. So because the NCAA has not been consistent, they've been horrible when it comes to denying waivers or accepting waivers. When they deny a player to go back home so he can be near his mother who has brain tumor, you just have to question everything when it comes to the NCAA. So I kind of like this role, but I do see the negative, because I've talked to some high school kids when this was even a discussion, not now when it's official, but during the discussions, and they were worried for those fringe players.
Yeah. And I will be honest, I had not thought about the high school aspect of it. And that is a great point. I think that's going to be one of the things that coaches have to figure out how to work with, because while that is unfortunate, and that's a downside of this, I think the good far outweighs the bad. And I also know that when saying that, I might have what I'm calling good, others might call horrible and it's going to ruin the game, and just unacceptable. I think it's good. And like I said, I think the good outweighs the bad. So it's why you're going to have to figure out how to deal with the high school aspect of it. That is going to change recruiting. But like you said, the NCAA isn't consistent. Golly, they came up with a rule today that they're going to start tracing the IP addresses to see if coaches are giving out their passwords to like the portal or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't even know how IP addresses work, and I know that doesn't work. Like, I'm glad to see you're, using your time and resources in a valuable way, as per the NCAA usually does not. But this 1 year rule, or this one-time transfer rule, I think it's going to change the game. It is. There's no doubt about it. It's going to make it look different, but I don't think it's necessarily going to make it different for the worse. I think it's going to be different for the better. Cade Mays should never have had to go through what he went through with the NCAA. Mm-hmm. Those are the sort of examples and the sort of players I think of when I think of this one-time rule. Guys who needed to be closer to home, because like you said, sometimes coaches leave, sometimes situations change, sometimes your family needs you to be closer, sometimes you do need to be closer to home, sometimes you're just in a bad situation and you need to be in a different spot. Maybe it's just not what you thought it was going to be. And I know you want to preach like stick to your commitment, and you're right, you should, if you're wanting to break your commitment purely because you don't like it or it's hard. But if you need to break that commitment because you're not where you should be, then I think, and I know we're changing subjects here where this is becoming much more big picture and philosophical, and I'm going to get on my soapbox about what players are entitled to. But at least one time, when you're 17, 18 years old when you're making that decision. How many of us at 17 or 18 years old made a decision that we thought was going to be the best thing for the rest of our lives, and then we got there and we were like, oh no, never mind. Yeah. How many people, okay, stop me if I get going too much here. How many people at 17 years old gave their significant other a promise ring? because you were going to be together forever. And then you spent one semester at college and you were like, nope, never mind. That's essentially what this is. It's, you know, the national letter of intent is like a promise ring. And then you get there and you're like, you know what? We actually don't go good together. We shouldn't be together. And if we stick it out, we're just going to end up on Judge Judy yelling at each other. So let's just part ways now.
That is the best analogy I've ever heard about
Thank you. It
the
just
transfer.
came to me like a flash of light breaking through the darkness. It came to me.
But no,
yeah.
it's remarkable. I still think a lot of people
give them that one-time rule. Just let them go one time. You never know.
I think a lot of people forget these are 17-year-olds making this decision, 17, 18-year-olds, and homesickness is a real thing. I think people forget about mental health. Some of these guys, you know, for example, during the pandemic, some of these guys sometimes couldn't visit their schools very often, the schools that they end up choosing. Also, how many times have we heard, Cassidy, about a player choosing a school, and then once they get to the school, all the stuff that they were told never come true? Or all the stuff that, you know, I've heard horror stories, not in connection to Florida, but other stuff that I've heard before in my years covering recruiting. I've heard kids promise that they're going to be studying this, and then once they get on campus, they get changed to another major. I've heard kids who come in and says, you're playing this position, and they change to a different position. I've heard, you know, when they get on campus, they think they're going to play for one assistant, and the assistant leaves, and the assistant that comes in, their personalities clash and they become depressed. They get, you know, that's just not who they signed up for. I think there's a lot of factors, and mental health of the athlete is very, very important. And if this can help you know, a player, you know, figure out, you know what, I'm not happy here. I need to find a different place where I can succeed and just, you know, be healthier, then I'm all for it.
I need to date somebody else.
Exactly. I need to break up.
We need to break up right now. Never, ever, ever get back together. Quote Tay-Tay. But yeah, and like you said, Florida can benefit from this. You may not like it, but you have to learn to live with it. Nick Saban does that really well. He complains and he pushes a fit and he whines and throws a hissy fit about rule changes and how he doesn't like them. And then who figures them out the quickest to his advantage? Nick Saban, every single time. So I think Florida is quickly on the path to do that, as we have seen recently with both football and basketball. It's going to turn college football into free agency, but you know what? I cover the NFL as well, and free agency is fun. And so I'm okay with it for a little while here.
And we actually talk about basketball and how Mike White has been using the transfer portal a lot on the Buddy Martin show on Tuesday night. You can head over to Buddy Martin's Facebook page and check out what we said about Mike White and all those basketball transfers and our thoughts on it and what we think the future of the basketball program will look like. So we did touch on this, Cassidy, a little earlier this week.
We did, yeah. Well, we do the show in conjunction with the Buddy Martin show and Buddy Martin Media. So like Jackie said, make sure to check that out. Earlier this week, we were joined by James Bates. He is just one of my favorite people in the entire world. I can just sit down and listen to him talk for hours and hours upon end. He has led a fascinating life, and he tells it about it in a fascinating way. And he played for Steve Spurrier in the University of Florida in the early 90s. He won SEC championships. He won a national championship. He was a linebacker on the 96 championship team, went on to star in a couple, actually, he did not star. Let me rephrase that. Went on to appear in a couple of movies. Jackie, do you remember which movies?
Any Given Sunday and The Waterboy.
Very good.
I actually watched Waterboy last night because I needed
Really?
Yes, I did. I needed to see where he was.
I don't even remember if you can see him. Yeah.
It's just
I don't know. He's in there. But yeah, and now he has a painting business, really cool. And we're going to hear from Bates both this week and next week. But this week we just had to sit down with him and say, Batesy, tell us your best Steve Spurrier stories. Go. And he has so many. He has hours upon hours. You can actually go to his YouTube page, and so just look for James Bates on YouTube. And he has a channel just for Steve Spurrier stories. So if you ever just want to fall down that rabbit hole on YouTube, go for it. You'll spend hours upon hours. You'll cry, you laugh so hard. So this is just a small snippet of those, but we got some that we'd never heard before, and that's always fun. So sit back, enjoy. Batesy's best Steve Spurrier stories. I don't think you could ever accuse Steve Spurrier of taking himself too seriously, though.
Yeah, yeah. I agree, but if you don't introduce him right, and you don't, and you know, if you don't take care of him like he deserves to be taken care of, like an introduction, for example, Cassidy. Okay.
Okay.
This is at an FCA banquet a couple years ago. It was actually the first time that I kind of butter my bread when it comes to Gator clubs by going around and I talk a little bit, but I don't know who's going to get drafted where, and I don't follow recruiting, and so they don't want me there to give them an update on recruiting, on who's 4 stars and 5 stars and whatever. And so I like to tell my head ball coach stories, and so but this is going to be and again about 3 years ago at the Santa Fe River Ranch. It's going to be the first time I'm ever in a same type of setting speaking like that with Coach Spurrier there. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, I want to make sure I don't upset him, and I want to take care of him. And so I'm in my mind, I'm trying to like map this out just right and make it funny and fun, but not to where it makes him mad. And I'm thinking, and so I'm just about like, 3 minutes before I'm going to go up and start this program. So I'm the host, I'm the MC, and he is the keynote speaker. And at one point I will introduce him, and he's sitting at the table right in front of us as we're eating our dinner, getting ready to go up. And he goes to me, he goes, "Batesy," and he reaches in his coat pocket and he has this paper folded up, and he goes, when you go up there, a lot of these times people at places like this, they don't introduce me right. They don't say what they should say when they're introducing me. He goes, "So when you get up there, just say whatever you're going to say, but then read this." And it was front and half of the back of this piece of paper. And it was, and as you can imagine, an impressive list, but it was all of these accolades. I mean, back to like Science Hill High School, where he never lost a game in pitching and baseball, and the, state championships and all this. And I mean, and it would have taken like 15 extra minutes to really kind of get through them all. And I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I did my thing, and I was like, hey, and you know what? And I just talked about his grandchildren. So I'm sure he was mad, but I just couldn't do it. I mean, because it was just, it wasn't like it was a room full of coaches that would be like, wow, I forgot he did that at Duke. It's just like it was an FCA meeting, just good people, and they just wanted to, hear Coach Spurrier speak. They didn't want me to hear me speak about him, is the way I saw it. So hopefully it was okay.
Did he talk to you afterwards?
Oh yeah. He
Run a lap. Yeah. One of, I think, my favorite Spurrier stories that I've ever heard you tell, and it was a long time ago, so I'm gonna make you retell it, is when he wanted to tear down the goalpost. Was that like an FSU game? Yeah,
it was the year after I graduated. So we had beaten FSU in the national championship game in the Sugar Bowl my senior year, but that was the rematch where they got us in a number 1 versus number 2 in Tallahassee, and it was it was my favorite Gator game of all time. I mean, including the ones I played in. I think. I mean, that was where we came back and we beat them in the swamp, and that was where Noah and Doug Johnson were switching up just about every other play, and just so many big plays by guys like Quezzy and Travis McGriff and Fred Taylor. And so after the game, he went down, and they were really like, they had it locked down. Doc Lucky and company, the UPD. I mean, they had a Gainesville Police Department as well, that they weren't going to let anybody rush the field. And I've actually done a painting of this. Coach Spurrier, he runs over to the goalpost as everyone's kind of clearing off, and he's done his post-game interviews, and he's sitting there, and he's kind of like acting like he's gonna, and he's like trying to like egg on all the people that are still in the stadium celebrating. He's like, come on, let's tear it down. And he's like, and there is I had one of my students actually, I think it was Michael Knopf, who worked for the Alligator. He dug the picture up for me because I used to always talk about it. The Alligator, they had a picture, and I just loved it, of him just standing there by himself, acting like he was going to tear down this goalpost. And so that's one of my paintings that was someone's Christmas gift a couple of years ago. But oh man, he's the best. But of course, nobody even could come down on the field. But he was basically trying to get them all to just run through the cops and come help him knock it down. Oh,
I can see the Gainesville Sun the next day. Steve Spurrier incites riot after beating FSU.
yeah. Or what if he would have been the one guy? You know how there's always like 2 or 3 that climb up on the goalpost and they're sitting on it back in the day anyway. What if he would have been one of those?
Imagine the world with social media and Steve Spurrier.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he was social media before it was social media, because it was like anything he would say, everybody was going to hear about it, you know, and you were going to have half of the people hated him, half of the people loved him. He was dividing the internet before there was an internet.
Do you think he prepared his quips ahead of time, or were they just in the moment?
I would say some of them, yeah. Like
citrus.
Like, yeah, well, that of course. I mean, that somebody told him, and he kind of had that in his back pocket. But stuff that you would wonder, like, I think when South Carolina came to town and they won, and he goes, and he said something like, "Yeah, well, they say only Gators get out alive. I guess a few Gamecocks do too every now and then, you know," and just stuff like that. You know, you could almost see, and I say that because some of the celebrations, like in '96. In the Sugar Bowl, I had a concussion in the second half, and he came over to me in the fourth quarter, and, you know, we're starting to run away with this game. I think the final was 52-20. I should know, and Coach Spurrier would know the final of every game probably that he ever coached in, which is one of the most, I mean, of all the impressive things that he's done on the field, that to me just blows me away. It's fascinating how he can recall plays while he was at Duke and all that. But and he comes over to me and goes, "Batesy, when we win this thing, get a few of your buddies, put me on your shoulders and carry me around a little bit." You know how, like, back in the day, especially how, like, the Bo Schembechlers or Barry Switzers of the world, and they would, like, carry them all off. And, you know, that final whistle blew, and I'm just out there running around, half concussed and half ready to go to Bourbon Street and jumping around in the middle of the field with all my buddies. And I just forgot. And he came and found me in the locker room afterwards. And he's like, "Batesy, thought you're going to put me on your shoulders and carry me around a little bit." I said, "Oh, Coach, I forgot." "Oh, shoot." You know, and just like, so it's stuff like that. And then a couple of years later, when he was, I think the SEC championship that they won after I was gone, he was in the Georgia Dome, and the whole game he coached it in just as, you know, short sleeves, collared shirt, and then, like, the last 5 minutes of the game, he had a rain jacket on. It was because he knew he was going to get the Gatorade dumped on him, and so he put his rain jacket on. So he thinks about some of those things. Yeah.
I apologize if I'm remembering the timeline wrong, but were you there and playing the year they played in Athens?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that's really cool too, because so our freshman class, 92, and most of us were redshirted, but that's like Danny Warfel and Lawrence Wright, and we'll see, like, guys like Dexter Daniels and Reggie Green, Jason Odom, they weren't redshirted, but Jeff Mitchell, Donnie Young, and we came in and we played the year we were redshirted, played in the Gator Bowl, and then our redshirt freshman year, we played in the Gator Bowl again. But then they came in to tear down the Gator Bowl and build Alltel Stadium. And so we had to play a home and away. So our freshman class played in the Gator Bowl our redshirt freshman year, and then in the Swamp my sophomore year, which, by the way, I had 2 interceptions and my only touchdown on my Florida Gator career, Cassidy Hill. But who's counting, huh? Who really cares about that? Because this is just storytelling, not about stats. but it was. And so it
Those
was.
stats tell a story. Those
Yes,
stats
they
tell a
do.
story.
Yes, they do. And I always point it out to my students because I'm like, yeah, and that's where I scored. Because we always have class in the swamp. I'm always like, yeah, that's where I scored my only touchdown. And all of my teammates made fun of me because I kind of like, if you watch the video, I kind of like half dive, but it's not a graceful dive at all over the goal line. And they're all saying I got hit by a sniper. And I'm like, I just like, Lou Holtz used to always say, when you get to the end zone, act like you've been there before. Don't celebrate or do this. But I had never been in the end zone before, so I didn't know how to act. And so we played Gator Bowl, then in the swamp, then between the hedges the next year, and then Alltel was ready. And so we played our senior year. We played in Alltel Stadium. So we played all 4 venues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I guess my question is, talking about him planning things ahead of time, did y'all go into that game knowing, and I know there's a little bit of a revenge factor because I believe Spurrier had lost as a player to Georgia. Mm-hmm. Did y'all go into that game knowing, like, we're just going to step on the gas and go?
Well, at that time, we were so much better than Georgia. Like it's crazy when you look back at those years in the early to mid 90s. Tennessee was always the big one, and it was always early in the season. And so, gosh, so much of our off-season workout, so much of our talk always would be like, Tennessee, because it's going to be a top 5 matchup. And then especially when they had Peyton. But like LSU, Georgia, anybody like who else would there have even been that would be like that would compete? We lost to Auburn, we never lost to Alabama, we never lost to LSU, they never came close. We never lost to Georgia, they never came close. We never lost to Tennessee, and really most of the time they didn't come that close. And so we knew we were going to get after them. But to answer your question, the piling on. Absolutely, he had no problem piling on against those guys. I mean, that was there's a story that I think it was Bob Pruitt. If you look at late in that game, Bob Pruitt was his defensive coordinator that year, and he likes to tell a story that it was 44 to whatever they had, 13 or whatever, and that. The story goes, which I don't really believe the story, but I like the story, but they're all so too good to be true that I have to put an asterisk on this story. And the reason is I don't think anybody would have to remind Steve Spurrier that nobody had ever gone between the hedges and scored 50 points on the Bulldogs. Okay, so I have to preface it with that. Now, I will say this. I called a Marshall game and I had dinner with my old defensive coordinator, Bob Pruitt. And this is how he told it. And he said that we're up, we're running out the clock about midfield, 40 some odd points. And somebody says, hey, coach, no one's ever scored 50 on the Bulldogs between the hedges, right? Time out. And it's like it sends in a play of like a double reverse pass, which is just unheard of at that point in the game when you're winning by that much. And we score a touchdown, and he turns around and he goes, well, now they have. And I just like, it's so beautiful. I love the story, but I question the validity of it. I have to say, and it's okay because there are so many others that I know for a fact are true. And I'll just, but I can't feel right about myself telling that one without the asterisk there.
Yeah. Like the one of him telling Danny people were going to sell his autograph for drugs.
That's as true as can be. Oh man! And the thing is Danny, and it's like Danny tells that story. If you look at some of the head ball coach stories on my YouTube channel, is when Danny came to my house and we recorded a couple head ball coach stories with him, and on a couple of them, he didn't even know where we were going. And on that one, if you watch, it's like one of my favorites because it's like such a real like reaction and emotion to Danny when he just starts chuckling. I said, what did he say they would do, Danny? And he said they would buy drugs with Danny's autograph. And and then, so a few years ago, they had a reunion of like all of his championship teams over in Daytona. And they would introduce a couple people from each of the teams to get up there and speak a little bit. And just about everybody that went up there, they quoted coach's his one-liner. Well, it's not their fault. It's our fault for putting them in there. And then he got up there and he said, you know what? You guys, I never said that. I didn't say that. You guys, somebody made that up, and you guys, you can say it if you want to, but I never said that. And then Danny came up there shortly after, and he goes, I can attest that Coach absolutely said that. And it's like, yeah, Danny saying that he said it. So, yeah, so that one's true as well, even if he denies it.
Cassidy, I know you heard most of those stories before, or at least some of them. That was the first time I heard Batesy really talk about his experience with Spurrier. So that was really awesome just to hear all those stories. And I'm so excited for everyone to see part 2 of this interview next week, because we get to know about Batesy a little bit away from the football field. We learn about him as a painter. We talk to him as a father, and I've talked to him about being a teacher. And I also see karma get Cassidy really quickly. So you guys watch next week, because she threw me under the bus.
He's
and
not
quickly,
gonna,
karma, get it.
Jackie, you gotta let that go.
I will not let it go until people watch what you did to me during this interview.
Oh gosh.
And just wait for what I come up with at some point, Cassidy. But thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode. And obviously just make sure you check up our YouTube channel. If you click on that bell on the top corner, that will send you notifications to your email and on your desktop when new episodes are up, and listen to it on our podcast on Anchor and several different platforms, including Spotify and Google. So thanks everyone for listening. For Cassidy, I'm Jackie. Have a good night.